Kyle T. Mosley of the Saints News Radio Network, and I am so proud to announce our new show on our network, and that is no other than the Bayou Blitz with Mr. Bob Rose of the Canal Street Chronicles, and he is our host for the rest of the year and beyond. So welcome to Network, Bob, as your own host, man. How you doing?
Thank you so much, Kyle. I am doing fantastic. I am really excited for this show. We hope to bring you Saints and you football fans lots of great content, hopefully a few great memories along the way. Just bear with us in the early weeks, especially as this is literally my first gig of any type this way. So, if you bear with us, hopefully we'll all grow together as a family.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, I'm just here to support you. Take it away, Bob.
Well, I think Mr. Barry Hurstis will be checking in with us in a little bit. But Saints fans, we plan on bringing you a weekly radio podcast, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to get ourselves a visual as well. But I'm going to do my best to line up at least one guest every week. But we are going to be covering the New Orleans Saints in as many angles as possible. We'll give you inside information whenever is possible as well. And, of course, our prediction's sure to go wrong. If you're going to bet the kids' college fund on anything that we say, I highly recommend against that. But we obviously, with the draft a week and 1 day away, we've got a busy show ahead of us both this week and next week. But we plan on, again, bringing you our weekly show at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time and 7 o'clock Central. And we're going to give you ways to tune in and listen to us if you missed our live broadcast as well. And so how nervous are you about this upcoming draft, Mr. Mosley?
Well, not so much as years prior, man, to be honest with you, Bob. I think with the Saints, they're in a pretty decent position with the talent that we do have. I think, of course, we can always use some extra athletic bodies out there, especially on defense. And I'm willing to give up that number 27 spot and trying to trade back, and let's see if we can pick up some more picks, because we really can get some value in some extra guys in the third round if possible. But I'm not that nervous about this one. Last year I was nervous. This year I'm like, let's see.
Well, and certainly they had themselves an absolutely historic draft last year. Arguably, for anybody that's been following the New Orleans Saints for years or all or most of their life, the only draft that this team has had throughout their history that really compares to, as far as immediate success goes, is I believe the year was 1981, and that brought in Ricky Jackson, obviously Hall of Fame linebacker, along with a couple other pieces of what would be a very strong 1980 New Orleans Saints team through the mid and later 80s, the Dome Patrol. And another draft that goes highly underrated in Saints history, I think, was Sean Payton's first draft in 2006, when they added a bunch of pieces that were integral for not only that year's run to the NFC Championship game, but obviously the run to the Super Bowl championship in 2009. So, I mean, time will tell if this draft has the staying power. But you figure we landed Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara, the defensive and offensive rookies of the year. And not only that, but you brought in a starter, an immediate starter at the offensive tackle position in Ryan Ramczyk, and he played well enough to be on the all-rookie team.
Yeah.
Another starter in Marcus Williams at the safety position, another member of the all-rookie team. Alex Anzalone, before he went down with a shoulder injury, he showed us some flashes, some very exciting athletic talent at the linebacker position. So I'm anxious to see what he's going to be able to bring to us. And yeah, like you said, Kyle, the team added so many key pieces, and really as much as anything, That was the key to their turnaround from 3 straight 7-9 seasons to 11-5 and less than 10 seconds away from an NFC Championship appearance.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you can't argue with at all what last year's draft brought to us.
Yeah, and think about this. The young talent that we brought in, as well as some of the free agent acquisitions that really contributed as well. The Saints were a wounded mass unit on defense, and they kept putting more and more bodies out there that contributed, more contributions from the team. So I think right now when we look at this projected class, what talent can we get to be able to add some more depth to our already talented young 2017 crew, right? So where are we going to go from here? How are we going to approach this draft? Are we going to go full out, or will we be more conservative? And usually the Saints usually take a conservative route, other than last year when they decided to jump up to get Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And, that for the last, well, pretty much since the season ended, but certainly over the last month or so, as the national pundits throw out their mock drafts and all of us that write for the different Saints publications put out our mock drafts and our player profiles and our own opinions on what's going on. What actually happens next Thursday evening is going to have everybody glued to their television set because you mentioned a possible preference in trading down from the 27th pick, and I myself have talked about that too, but you'll hear just as many people that either project or even talk about their hope that the Saints will trade up. Which leads me to one of my questions of the week. Would you trade up in this draft pile to get a quarterback to replace Mr. Drew Brees?
The only person I would do it for is, that's my opinion. And the reason why I say Mayfield, I like Rosen, but I really like Mayfield. And here in Texas, I get to see a lot of the Oklahoma football games, and the way that young man has the gamemanship, the presence as a leader to be able to will his team back into willing them back into the games. I've seen a couple of times where Oklahoma looked pretty down and out, and there was no way they were going to get back to win the games. And if it were not for Baker Mayfield and his presence as their leader, then they would have been out of contention altogether. So that's the one thing I like about Baker Mayfield. Rosen, I like the fact that he's a very talented young man. He also has that little swag to him. And I did see a few of the UCLA games, but those are the only two quarterbacks that I see the Saints being able to get to really be the heir apparent to Mr. Drew Brees, right? But, man, why would you do it unless you really see a defensive end? You'd really need that talent on defensive end more than another quarterback at this time, in my opinion.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And, not only defensive end, but we spent what felt like the entire 2017 season on your show talking about the lack of productivity that New Orleans was getting from their tight end position. And there's 3 tight ends in this draft that I really, really like. And you'll see them. Mike Gesicki from Penn State. I have been on his bandwagon for well over a year now. But Dallas Goedert and Hayden Hurst from South Carolina, they're all projected to go anywhere from, I've seen them as high as the mid-20s of the first round to midway through the second round. So I think, and they're all very talented pass-catching tight ends. They might not have the all-around blocking game that you might prefer from a more traditional tight end, but these guys are going to give you a downfield threat. They're going to be a weapon into the red zone, and they're going to actually give you some third down production. And we know that New Orleans really struggled there offensively last year. Very uncharacteristic for a Saints team. And then you pointed out the still maybe not as glaring need, but still obvious need for a defensive end or somebody to get some quarterback pressure opposite Cam Jordan. Now, we saw New Orleans have a little bit of success last year, sort of in a rotational situation with Alex Okafor, who did re-sign to stay with the team this offseason.
Good sign.
Last year, rookie Trey Hendrickson, as well as even Haoli Kikaha, can still give you some pressure off of the edge. But I do agree with you that it would be nice to bring in one player that can do the job of what those three men did last year. So I mean that begs the question: do you sacrifice? If you're going to make a move to go up and get a quarterback, be it Mayfield or Rosen or any of those guys, what you're basically, in my opinion, saying to me is that we don't expect anything from this particular draft pick in 2018. This is completely set for the future. But what you've done is tell me that you feel comfortable with what you already have in position. And given the moves, the off-season free agency moves that we saw the Los Angeles Rams make and the Minnesota Vikings make, and some of the other competitors in the NFC to an already talented roster, if you were coach or general manager, Kyle, how would that affect your your draft planning coming into this? Would you still have an eye for a quarterback, or would you be more focused on the two positions or adding depth like we've been talking about?
Yeah, good question. My old vice president always would tell me, Kyle, I'm always interviewing for your replacement. So, and she was, and you had to do that because the key is in the National Football League as well as any business, you never know what the unexpected could happen. And I'm not putting any bad juju out there or anything to that nature, but you have to keep in mind it's a violent sport. It's a sport that's very unpredictable from week to week, really from day to day, even at practice, right? You have some guys who look at Teddy Bridgewater and Deshaun Watson who went down at practice and not even touched, and they tore ligaments and ACLs and everything else. So when it comes to Drew Brees, he's an outstanding talent, Hall of Famer, of course. Do we really need to approach this draft as let's get his heir apparent? And Sean Payton has already stated to the press he's not very impressed with many of the quarterbacks that are out there to be able to make that huge jump up into a higher spot within the first round.
Yeah, no, I saw that quote from Coach Payton as well, and honestly, it kind of brought a grin to my face because I've been an advocate at leaving the quarterback position alone in the 2018 draft because Drew Brees showed us little sign of any decline in his play last year. We know, and I'm looking around for a piece of wood to knock on as I say this, right. He has been extremely healthy and durable throughout his entire New Orleans Saints career. So like we just talked about, if you draft a quarterback in this draft, you're basically, I don't want to say you're wasting a pick because you never look at a draft pick as a waste, but you have told me that particular selection, you have no intention of it being a factor in your 2018 season.
Right.
And remember, New Orleans does not have a second-round pick. That pick was dealt last year when they packaged draft picks to move up to get Alvin Kamara. So I'll take Kamara over any second-round draft choice and not look back. But basically, say we look at the Saints and what they have on the board as far as draft picks. They have their first-round selection at number 27. Then they don't pick again until the third round, 91st pick overall.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have 4th, 2 5ths, 2 6ths, and a 7th-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make a move to draft a quarterback in the first round, especially if you have to trade up and almost undoubtedly, having to package that third-round pick in a deal to move up, then you're not drafting a player that you intend or hope will be a contributor until the 4th round, the 127th pick overall.
Right.
Is this team that good right now to basically say we don't intend on any rookie being a contributor this season?
No.
Do you think this team is that good?
No, we're not. I believe we have an excellent team. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think we're to that next level yet. But those sophomores now, they're going to make huge contributions still to the team. We still need to look at some depth, man. So, Bob, you have to take what the Patriots used to do in the past, because they were already down picking 27, 28, 29, 30th or whatever, right? So if a team approached them to say, okay, we'd like to jump up into the first round again, they were all for it, because then they would collect more talent, right, in those second, third, fourth rounds. And I think that's what we can be able to do. If Sean Payton, as well as Jeff Ireland and Loomis, say to themselves, we don't see anybody who's going to be that significant of an impact, especially if the guy they really like goes to another team, why wouldn't you try to package a deal? Or why wouldn't you try to see what more can we get? What more value can we get from adding some other talent, some overlooked talent, some sleepers that may be out there in the third and fourth round, by having extra picks to be able to utilize. So I'm for doing whatever we can be highly strategic in doing, as far as getting some supporting talent to add some depth, and may be able to find another athletic type of player or potential rookie of the year player like a Kamara, but on the defensive side, or someone who's going to be a contributor that would possibly shock the world, but make it in our system in New Orleans.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm right in your corner, as I said, about kind of hoping that the Saints trade back a little bit in this year's draft. And whenever I said that to other people, they quickly point out to me, and they're absolutely correct when they point it out, that Sean Payton has never traded back in the first round. It's always up. And the history will show that to be true.
Did you mean by trade out of the first round or back into the first round? What are you saying?
No, trade out of the first round, or trade back from the pick that he had. I apologize.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like we said, he's never done anything but trade up if he's made a move in the first round. I happen to like this draft a lot, with the players that'll be available, at least projected to be available, in the second, third, fourth rounds. I think that this, my own personal opinion, for whatever that's worth, I happen to think that this draft is not necessarily top heavy. There's certainly a few blue chip prospects, but I love the depth that this draft has. I love what it had, the depth at, we mentioned 3 tight ends. There's also 2 or 3 more that would be available, I think, in the middle rounds that could really help this team. The only defensive end or a traditional edge rusher I like as far as a top 10 pick would be Bradley Chubb from NC State. And I don't think the Saints are going to make a move to get him.
Right.
So once you look after Chubb, there's this pretty significant drop-off. And as far as immediate contribution, But again, I like the depth at that position.
Right.
And when I say depth, I mean a player that you can pick up, like you said, Kyle, in the second if you trade into there, or third or fourth round. So Saints fans maybe, and I know Sean Payton's history, but there's a first time for everything. Start looking at the second round draft order. And two teams that jump immediately out to me is the Indianapolis Colts and the Cleveland Browns. Both have 2 picks in the top 10 of the second round. Those are the types, and the Browns especially with their off-season activity, they're moving all over the place. So like you mentioned before, Kyle, and not only Peyton and Loomis and Ireland, but every staff in the NFL listens to every single offer from every single team right up until they walk that pick up to the podium. But, Saints fans, if you are curious about any potential moves into the second round, be it New Orleans trading up into the second or trading their 27th pick to move back, look at those 2 teams or any teams that have multiple picks in the second round, because that's like having some extra cash on you. And teams are a little bit more willing to deal that way. Or you start looking at the needs of the other teams that will be drafting. And, maybe that there's a prospect as we get into the 25th, 26th pick and, New Orleans is on deck. There might be some players there that maybe wouldn't necessarily pay dividends for New Orleans for the Saints to pick at 27 because they happen to already be strong in that position. A running back is a good example. Look for some teams to move in to the latter stages of the first round. We see it every year. That's where New Orleans might elect to break the history that they've had under Sean Payton and make that move that you suggested early in our show. So keep an eye on that.
Yeah. Here's what bothers me. I really think the team that really needs to jump up into their first round would be like a Houston Texans or someone like that. And they need to really have a major contribution for what's going on with them. So would the Texans feel the need to be able to get into that spot? Because let's say one of those running backs start to fall, like Geis or someone like that. That would be a great spot for the Texans to jump into and try to pick up somebody, because they need someone to support the efforts of Watson. Not to say anything against Blue and all those other guys that were there for the Texans, but as well as Foreman, who they picked up last year. But to have a guy like Geis available for the Texans makes a lot of sense for them, because he's a dynamic player. He can catch the ball out the backfield as well, and he's going to be elusive out in space as well. So that falls into line well with Watson's abilities. So will the Texans look at that, or will they look at trying to get somebody to support them in their linebacking core as well? So will a linebacker be available at that spot for them? And I hear a lot of things here in Houston. There's talk about them doing something to get into the first round. So that's a prime suspect as far as a trading partner with the New Orleans Saints, if possible.
Yeah, that would be a perfect one. Or another team that doesn't have a first-round pick this year, the Kansas City Chiefs. And just like you pointed out with Houston, you take a quick look at the Chiefs roster, and you realize, yes, they made the playoffs last year, but just like every other team, they have needs. So you start to look at, okay, well, what are their team needs, and what could potentially be available in the latter part of that in the latter part of that first round. And I mentioned the Indianapolis Colts. As you mentioned, if a couple of those running backs start to fall, Indianapolis has a glaring need for a capable running back. So again, and if we were to sit here and say, this is the one position that the Saints will not draft a player in the first round, I think it's safe to say that running back is that position.
Yeah.
Every other position, I mean, we even talked about the quarterback position, but every other position on that team, you'll hear the term best player available. So every other position on the Saints, you could see them draft a player at number 27 if they are the best player on the board to fill in to that roster. If for no other reason than to bolster depth. Like I said, I don't think running back. I think we can cross that off of the list as I'd be willing to bet my house that they will not draft a running back in the first round.
Yeah, I read somebody put that out. I don't recall if it was CBS or someone to that nature, that the Saints need to have a running back because you have Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, but what do you have behind them? Okay, so we need some depth. But depth can be found in latter rounds, in my opinion. Look, man, it won't shock me if, let's say, Sean Payton stays pat and we have a excellent opportunity to get someone at guard or someone at defensive tackle if we can't find or love a defensive end, right? It wouldn't shock me if they're able to get somebody on the line. And let's make no bones about it. That Ramczyk pick, it was a head scratcher to most, but it wound up to be an outstanding pick for the team, did it not? So, I mean, to get people on the line, and we have a need. We need to have somebody, and that's why we pursued Sue, right? So if there's one of these young men who are out there who could be a contributor at defensive tackle, like that young man who's the McIntosh out of Miami, would we take a look at him? Let's say that young man from UTEP drops down to the Saints and he's a great guard. Why wouldn't you try to look at him as well? So Hernandez, that's his name. So these are some of the things, scenarios that go around in the heads of the coaches that we will never have privy to, right? So, but Bob, I mean, right now, listen to what you said at first. This is the time that everybody's listening. Can we make a deal? Listening. Can we make a deal? And if I was the New Orleans Saints, I wouldn't mind picking up extra 2 or 3 picks if we can find somebody who's willing to make a deal.
No, absolutely not. Like I said, I personally like this draft a lot in rounds 2, 3, and 4. The type of players that are projected to go there. I've been driving myself nuts as I'm trying to. I've already written out one mock draft. I must have gone through half a tablet of paper jotting down ideas for a second mock draft. Because I like so many players in that area, but like we've already said, New Orleans doesn't have a second round pick, and looking at some of the players, and you mentioned McIntosh from Miami, that's a perfect example. I really like him as a player, but would I draft him with the number 27th pick of the first round? Probably not. So that's a prime example of we like these players in this hole, but it's a bit of a reach where we're at. Let's see if we can reach out, or who's reaching out to us, where we can pick up a couple more picks. And it doesn't even have to be in this year's draft. People use draft picks as mortgage. We saw it with New Orleans last year. They gave away the 2018 second round draft pick to move up in the 2017 third round. And what did that net them? Well, that gave them the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I think it paid off pretty well. The draft picks are always in constant motion, not only in the first round, but even throughout the draft. It gets difficult to pay attention to as it gets into the third, fourth, fifth round. and things start moving a lot faster. But yeah, I think we'd be out of our minds to sit here and say that New Orleans will not make any deals with any of their draft picks. The question the obvious question of the night is, what are they going to do, and what rounds are they going to do it?
Let me ask you
for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just had one quick question for you, Bob. Let's say something unexpected happened. One of these young men who were projected to go in the top 15 as a quarterback. Okay, let's say something happens like the Aaron Rodgers effect happened, right? And someone's just sitting there in the green room, and number 27 comes up. Is it that enticing enough for us to say, yes, let's do this right now?
I think it would be. I think it would be, and I think if we injected, Coach Payton or Mickey Loomis or Jeff Island, I think if we injected them with truth serum, that they would admit to the same thing. You used Aaron Rodgers. I think that is the perfect, most recent example of a potential. And remember, guys, this is the draft, so everything there's nothing that is set in stone. We could sit here and say, run off the list of the Tom Brady's and the Terrell Davises and the Marcus Colstons and late round picks that were Pro Bowl caliber players, just as we can sit here and make a list of top 3 draft choices that were colossal busts. But Aaron Rodgers is a perfect example of a blue chip potential franchise quarterback that tumbled. And if you guys remember, it was he and Alex Smith were the top 2 quarterbacks that year, and many people had Rodgers projected to go with the top pick as well. Now, as you mentioned, he fell to I don't remember how far he fell, but it was into the 20s. So I think if one of these first round quarterbacks start tumbling, and they end up being there at 27, or heck, even the early 20s. Where it's not going to cost you quite as much to trade up. I think we may see New Orleans make a move at that point. And we've heard Peyton talk about earlier in the draft process how much he liked Mayfield, how much he liked Baker Mayfield in his game. We've talked about we've heard him say how much he likes Lamar Jackson. Which obviously, immediately the draft pundits were trying to tie the Saints to Lamar Jackson. You mentioned Josh Rosen from UCLA, and I really like Rosen. There's Allen from Wyoming and Darnold from USC. I find it hard to believe that any one of those guys, except perhaps Jackson, would fall that far. But the year that Aaron Rodgers was drafted, nobody projected he would fall that far either. So I can really see the Saints pulling the trigger if one of those guys start tumbling, and if they make it past 15 or 18, say, we may start to feel some movement from New Orleans to get their quarterback. And I don't know that I would have that as big a problem with that. Because someday, and I hope it's not for many decades, but someday the team is going to have to replace Mr. Drew Brees.
Oh, yeah.
It's better to have a guy that you have confidence in and it's already on the roster rather than scrambling.
Yeah, definitely. It has to happen in every circumstance. They had to replace Unitas. They had to replace Montana. It's going to happen. One day Brady's going to be replaced. It has to happen. That's the natural evolution of man, of the species at quarterback. It has to happen. So it will happen, man. So, but Lamar Jackson, and I'm just going to say this, unless someone has true faith in picking him in the first round, I think we most likely will see him in either second or third round. It's unfortunate, in my opinion, because he has so much talent. I think a lot of GMs are going to be haunted because I think Lamar Jackson is going to really prove some people wrong about him.
That young man is undoubtedly the biggest wild card in this draft. He has, like you said, Kyle, he has potential top 10 talent. I mean, the man won the Heisman Trophy. He can do it all on the football field. I have watched some of his film, and I think that he can. I don't think. I would place a wager that he could be a very dynamic player in the NFL. I personally do not like his accuracy. That is the one thing that if I were an NFL coach or GM, I would pass on him as a high pick because of that. He has never shown himself to be an accurate passer whatsoever. Even in the combine, as a matter of fact, just earlier today, I watched on YouTube. If you folks are curious, they have a video available where every single one of Jackson's throws at the combine, a controlled environment, is on video, and he looks to have an okay release. His footwork is pretty solid, and that's something that we know Coach Payton pays particularly close attention to is a quarterback's footwork. But his passes were consistently behind his receivers, were high, or leading them too far. Now, part of that is youth and inexperience, I understand, but again, that's a controlled environment. You don't have a 250-pound edge rusher that runs a 4.5 40 barreling down on you in the fourth quarter during a drive that you need to make the playoffs or continue the season. That changes just a little bit. So I don't like Jackson's accuracy. And that's where, if I were drafting, I would pass on him in the first round. Now, you mentioned if he tumbles into the second round or third round, I would set a speed record getting up to the podium to draft him at that point.
Yeah.
So, again, we're talking about value with all these players, too.
Right. Look, guys, and I may get shot, and some people may come at us on Twitter or wherever. Drew Brees wasn't highly accurate as a college quarterback, if I remember correctly. And I saw a lot of those Purdue games because my cousin played at Purdue with Brees. So, look, all I'm going to say is this. Drew Brees turned out to be the most accurate passer in the National Football League's history. And he did it by controlling his mechanics. He'll be a good teacher if he chooses to do so for a gentleman like Lamar or even the young people behind him, right? You know, you can't do anything but learn from Drew Brees. The key is with this pick and with the picks coming up, where are we going to find some value, but also where are we going to find somebody who can contribute? And I really think there's some need on that defensive line. We need to find someone who can be able to contribute, and we need somebody who's going to be able to contribute on the offensive line, because Jermon Bushrod, in my opinion, he's in the latter stages of his game, you know. And I said this last year, Bob, I don't know if you remember. If we lose Clemente, that's going to be a big hurt for the New Orleans Saints. So how do we go ahead and find somebody who can be able to come in? Because offensive line, you know, you're going to have an injury somewhere within that line, somewhere during the season, you know. So Clemente, that's why he was so valuable to play so many different positions. So can we find a guy like that to be able to help us out? You know, you got some guys out there on the market that we just need to look at. There's that young kid out of Georgia, Isaiah Wynn. You know, could he be able to come in and be one of those guys? I know he didn't do much as far as in the scouting combine because of injury, but, you know, hey, he's a big guy, he's strong, you know. Could he be one of those guys that we could be able to, that's still around, let's say the second, third round or whatever? Can we get him into play and put him into place on that line in case we need someone like that. And Turner is a mystery. Landon Turner. I thought so much of that kid. I thought he was going to be a major contributor for the Saints, and he's still going to be with us going into his third year, right?
Yeah, he's going into his third year. Like you said, he had a major regression last year.
Yeah.
He played reasonably well in camp his rookie year, certainly well enough to stick as an undrafted free agent, and even got some significant playing time over his rookie season. And he struggled to even make it out of. Well, technically, he didn't make it out of preseason last year. They cut him. But they brought him back. But yeah, I mean, clearly he was a non-factor. I don't really know what happened to him either. His game definitely stagnated. I know they really like Cameron Tom, one of their unrestricted free agents from last year. Mm-hmm. They were raving about his development on the practice squad, and even some off season. Looking forward to his development into the off season. So if they really like what they have there, that obviously would move the priority of depth at the offensive line a little bit lower. Because I agree with you, Kyle, as great as of a career as Jermon Bushrod has had, with the Saints and since he left, he is certainly on the tail end of his career. And yes, you were one of the people that were talking about how valuable Calamente was to the Saints because of his skill and his versatility. And I think that's an underrated loss that this team suffered in the offseason. And they didn't suffer many losses, but I think I would put Calamente's free agent defection as a bigger loss than the team not re-signing Kenny Vaccaro. That's how important I think Calamente was to this line.
Yeah, I had him at the top, man. And people may think I'm crazy. I know they gave him the opportunity to become a starter with the Texans, right? But man, I would sign him. I kept on saying it. Sign him. Find a way to sign Calamente because he is valuable. And I'm just going to throw this out there. Max Unger is getting older, man. Calamente could have stepped in at center if he needed to. So this guy could have played any position on that line as a substitute or whatever, if not a starter, and did a very fine job for the New Orleans Saints. Hey, let me ask you this. This kid, Orlando Brown, a lot of people thought very highly of him. He had a very poor combine, but he did a little bit better when it came to the OU's Pro Day. What do you think about him?
Like you said, his draft stock dropped because of a poor performance at the combine. If you look at film on Orlando Brown, he is a monster of a human being. A giant tackle, capable of playing either side, either left or right tackle. Over his collegiate career, he has struggled a little bit with speed rushers. His footwork is a little bit slow, they say. But that's the kind of thing. It's not that he's a plotter. That he doesn't. He does get himself up on the balls of his feet pretty well, and he has some bounce in his step. He's just, in the film that I've seen, he's a little bit slow to react to the outside. That's more, from what I've seen, that's more of a foot shuffle problem, shuffling his feet, rather than just not having the physical ability to get out there. And that's the kind of thing that can be coached up. And that's why these coaches and scouts watch this film. Everybody has weaknesses in their game. I don't care who you are. Or what age you are, for that matter. But that's why these scouts spend so much time watching film, because when you spot a weakness in his game, if you're the coach, you sit there and you say, that's not something that can be fixed. That's just a natural defect, and we know the ego of every coach, of every sport, or I can coach that, or I can fix that. With Brown, I think his deficiencies are very fixable, and he's a first-round talent that is not going to be drafted in the first round because of a poor athletic performance at the combine and his struggles with some speed rushers, like I said. So we talk about value. That's somebody that could be worth moving to in the second round, or perhaps even sitting there at pick number 91 in the third round. Or Orlando Brown is a potential starting tackle in the NFL. I'd be excited to bring him in.
Good. I have another guy, Sam Hubbard. A lot of talk has been given around him. I saw NOLA.com had him as one of their top picks in the first round if the New Orleans Saints stayed at 27. I have question marks about him. How do you feel?
And I did a draft profile on Sam Hubbard about a week ago for Canal Street Chronicles. A lot of people are putting him in the range of a late first round, early second round value. He's one of those guys that we talk about, after Chubb, that there's a significant drop off. There's a significant drop off at the edge rusher position. But Hubbard is right there as far as abilities. Athletically, he's a little bit limited, but he's a worker. He was productive for an extremely deep and talented Ohio State defensive line, and that's the thing to remember. Too many of us get caught up in what's the guy's 40 time. What's the guy's cone shuffle time? How much can he bench press? How high did he jump? How long did he jump? Sam Hubbard just makes plays on the football field. He takes nice angles to the backfield. He could stand to bulk up a little bit, get stronger, particularly in his upper body, because he sets a fundamental base well. And I'm talking against the run now. He sets his base well fundamentally. He can get knocked off balance or overwhelmed a bit by a power blocker, and that's where adding some strength can help him. I don't think he's going to be an elite 12 to 15 sack a year, year in and year out guy, but I think he's going to be a solid contributor for any team that picks him up. If the Saints grabbed him, even at pick number 27, like I said, some people have labeled him as the quote-unquote safe pick, and what they mean by that is he's going to give you value, but his ceiling might not be very high. So I think he would fit in well with what the Saints already have in Okafor and Hendrickson, and even Kikaha or George Johnson at that position. Hubbard would work his way into a rotation. Would I expect him to develop into a perennial Pro Bowler? Honestly, no. Honestly, no. He'd be a solid contributor.
Bob, you brought the name up just now, Hendrickson. He just reminds me too much of Hendrickson. I thought we already had a guy like that. So why are we picking another safe pick? Look, if you're going to stay there, roll the dice. Do something with somebody athletic or someone who's going to be – it's got to be – if I'm staying at 27 – let me do something big and make an impact. That's my opinion. And, unfortunately, you may not have an impact guy waiting for you to pick them, unless it's the young man from Boston College. I think I see more potential in him than Hubbard, but will he be there? That's the question.
Harold Landry from Boston College. Yeah, I'm with you. He would definitely give you more explosive ability off of that edge. And I've seen Landry projected to go as high as 15 or 16, and I've also seen him fall out of the first round.
Me too.
So
right.
He's one of those guys that we could see a wild swing on draft day. And again, we mentioned Hubbard, we mentioned Landry. I've been looking at Lorenzo Carter from Georgia. Those are just three guys that are lumped in that group that fall right after Chubb as far as value. And like you just said, you sit there and you're sitting at number 27, and you're like, could this guy be special for us? And if not, why am I taking him? Why am I taking him? I'm not going to force a need onto. Remember, this is not a 5-11 team we're talking about either,
right.
where they just reach into a barrel, pick a player out, and know he's going to contribute because they were just so bad. No, this is an 11-5 playoff team that is looked at by almost the entire league as a bona fide Super Bowl contender. So you have to be very careful what you do with this number 27 pick. And again, you're not just picking a player just because his name is valued high on the board. You sit there in that draft room and you ask yourself, is this player going to be special for the New Orleans Saints? And if not, why would we pick him?
Right. I don't know, man. And I really believe this. And they've been successful in doing it. If it's not the person you want, don't take them. Fall back. You need to do that. If you're going to take the person, then it's got to be, let's make a splash and with a contributor, like you said. I have one last question about the defensive ends. There's that kid out of USC Green. Any thoughts about him?
He's a big raw prospect. He has all the athletic ability in the world, but like I said, he's raw. He doesn't have great fundamentals, which basically means he can be beat out into the flat. He has rather slow play recognition, but again, that's the kind of thing that will improve with good coaching and playing experience. But if you're going to sit there and say, you know what, this kid has all the ability in the world, and his flaws are just due to being a fairly raw project. Being a raw project wouldn't scare me off. Again, and we've talked about what kind of depth that the Saints have at that particular position. And again, we're not talking outside of Jordan. We're not talking about a defensive line chock full of all pros or even potential Pro Bowlers, but we are talking about a talented rotational unit. So that's where you sit there and you say, this guy has tons of potential. He could contribute right away, but but not as an every down player. We're going to work him into the rotation, and he's going to get better and improve as he plays more. Very similar to the way the Saints viewed David Onyemata 3 or 4 years ago. I don't remember when they drafted Onyemata, but it was a very similar situation. There wasn't a lot of tape on David at that time, but what you saw an athletic beast who was just raw and a lot of times got himself caught out of position. And this kid from USC, I see a lot of those same qualities out of him, actually.
Yeah. You're going to laugh, but I think that's the one thing positive Bill Johnson did was to say, let's draft Onyemata. So look, man, the potential is always going to be there. And if you look at some of the undrafted free agents that really make an impact on teams, and also the few that even go on to have stellar careers or even Hall of Fame careers, you never know, right? And you can have a person with all the talent in the world. Is how they perform on the field, how well they're able to learn and acclimate to the system that you have in place and be able to prove themselves on the battlefield day in and day out. So hopefully we are able to find those type of character guys that can come in and contribute with the New Orleans Saints. That's the special touch that we're going to have to really need to make sure that we pick up another guy like Kamara and like Marshawn Lattimore, like Ramczyk, and the list can go on and on and on. It's going to be fun. I think the training camp is going to be fun. Let's say you have all these young guys who were injured and now they're coming back competing for a spot on the roster, really, or to be on that first squad, right? So Anzalone, wow, who will he be competing against? Right? So you bring in that free agent from the Jets. So will he compete against him, or who is it? Craig Robertson, or those are the things that I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen during the off-season training, as well as when the training camp finally opens in the summertime.
Oh, absolutely. And, we didn't even talk about, you mentioned Anzalone, and we've talked about Hendrickson a little bit. Those are two guys from what can only be classified as an outstanding draft last year. Those are two guys that they drafted and did have expectations for. Not that they fell a little bit short, but Hendrickson was kind of dinged up all year and was a bit slow starting out of the gate. And Anzalone, we lost early in the season and really never got to see what he could showcase. So that's something to consider too as we head into draft night next Thursday, is what the Saints already have returning at different positions that we haven't seen a lot of yet. And Demario, we didn't even talk about free agency tonight, so that's my fault. My fault, folks. We're just so excited about the draft, but the Saints added Demario Davis. And he is an exciting linebacker prospect. And Kyle, both you and I are fans of Craig Robertson, and I happen to like what A.J. Klein brought to the table. This is going to be a vastly improved linebacking core, even if they don't add another player into this draft. We're going to see some heavy competition at OTAs and training camp. We're going to see some heavy competition. And I'm not talking for roster spots. I'm talking for snaps. These guys are going to be deeper than we've seen out of the New Orleans Saints in a lot of positions for quite some time. So this is a talented team, folks. So if the Saints come draft night, come the first night of the draft, if it gets announced that there is a trade and the New Orleans Saints have traded out of the first round, don't throw things at your TV. We should have every confidence in this front office that they know what they're doing. And obviously in next week's show, we'll talk about some specific, maybe under the radar prospects or who's right at the top of the list, because next week's show, ladies and gentlemen, will be on draft eve.
That's going to be fun. That's going to be fun. Oh, wow. I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Bob, think about this. Muhammad also, he saw some limited playing time last season. He still looked kind of out of place, but a year under his belt and knowing what he contributed during the preseason last year, led the team in sacks. He's going to be fighting too. That's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've sat here and talked about Onyemata, and we've talked about a couple potential draft prospects that, athletically, they could be monsters. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, and I know you feel the same way because both you and I had numerous conversations about Muhammad last year. New Orleans already has a guy like that on their roster, a very explosive, rugged pass rusher. With the physical ability to play against the run. He just didn't see a lot of regular season snaps last year because he was so raw. He's had one off season as a pro player, one off season in Ryan Nielsen and Dennis Allen's defensive scheme. I am very interested to see how he develops. If we're talking about undrafted free agents or under the radar guys, another guy that I have my eye on is in the secondary, Arthur Millette. He was a very talented cornerback coming out of Memphis that went undrafted last year, stuck on the roster, got some special team snaps, but he has some nice ability too. So folks, don't just look at the 2017 New Orleans Saints statistics last year and see who contributed. Realize that there's some young and talented players that didn't get on the field, but these coaches have seen way more than we have. So they know what they have already. They have a good thumb and a good feel for the pulse of this team and what the true team needs really are. All we can do is watch the film for what's already been put out there, but they see these guys every day in practice. And Muhammad and Millette are two guys I'm excited to see what they will bring to the roster this season.
Yeah, definitely. So look, we have depth, health. If we can keep those guys healthy, you have more depth, right? So we're just going to be praying for a very healthy season for the Saints, because I do know with the level of competition and that schedule that we have coming our way in 2018, it's going to be a pretty ferocious time week after week in the National Football League for the Black and Gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And for folks that don't know, the official NFL schedule will be released tomorrow evening. Yeah. So keep an eye on Saints News Network and Canal Street Chronicles. We'll all get that get those dates released to you as soon as the NFL releases them. But like you said, Kyle, I mean, there's a regular murderer's row awaiting the New Orleans Saints. Not only their division, which is typically rough, but the playoff teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers are on the schedule. They have the Philadelphia Eagles. They have a rematch with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
They have the Los Angeles Rams. Yeah, this is going to be a very entertaining football season.
Yes, it will. It will. And I see the Saints prevailing, and we will talk a little bit later about our projections. But, of course, that's a lot of football left to come. So, hey, Bob, it's been a real good show starting off. Anything more you want to talk about, buddy?
Well, there's tons more, but I know we're under a fairly limited time slot.
No, we can keep going.
Like I said,
we can keep going. It's up to you.
Well, I mean, if you're up to it,
I'm up to it.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Mosley, and you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit better over the last year as you've helped boost my career. But one of the things that we have talked about, you ran the Crescent City Connection for a long time, and you basically been overseeing a lot of careers, helping them along. Overseeing your writers, overseeing different sportscasters, things like that. Tell us a little bit about your experience and your history with the New Orleans Saints, and how and why you got into this business.
Oh man, that's a loaded question, man. So look, I've been a Saints fan my entire life. Literally my entire life. So I was a Saints fan. My dad took me to the games at Tulane Stadium, and his good friend Bob Pollard played for the New Orleans Saints. And we would be down waiting for Bob to come out to give him a little high five, a little slap, and now and then a word of encouragement. And then, I seen some really great games, and I've seen some real tragic games in my days for the Saints, and all the way through the Superdome and Archie Manning, those guys, and the list goes on and on. So when it came down to how the network was started, it was really started because I didn't see enough of New Orleans Saints representation on the web, to be honest with you. A lot of what you would see is people making comments in the forum section of the NOLA.com, or you would see people on SaintsReport.com. And, Mike Detillier, everybody, of course, and rightly so, hinged on his every word for the New Orleans Saints. I grew up listening to Buddy Diliberto and those guys, and Hap Glaudy and those guys. So, and reading Peter Finney. So I wanted to be able to put something out there for the New Orleans Saints fans from a younger perspective, I would say, because we didn't have any blogs. We just had forums. So I wanted to start a blog. And the first blog we started was DeuceandReggie.com. That's when the Saints first drafted Reggie Bush. I bought the domain name, I believe, a week after Reggie was in the fold as our number one pick. I thought, oh man, this will be a cool name, DeuceandReggie.com. and we did pretty well the first season. And that same season, I bought the domain name saintsnews.net because I was thinking we need to get more Saints news out there as well. Let's have something that's going to be 24 hours. People keep getting aggregated news from all the sources around the web. Man, let's do it. So I did it, and I did it all myself. And I wrote myself. I wrote the initial blogs and my thoughts and opinions and analysis of the team. And those guys at Canal Street Chronicles started around the same time as I did, and Pete and those guys, right? So it was just myself, Pete were the only blogs out there at that time. And years went by. I wanted to do podcasting, did not have the time, but after the Saints picked up Danny Clark, after their year of winning the Super Bowl, one of his representatives contacted us out of the blue, said, "Hey, look, we saw your blog. Have you guys ever thought about doing interviews, live interviews?" Yeah, sure. I always wanted to do a podcast, right? So I created Hanging with Danny Clark. That was our first podcast. And he was with us for several shows. Myself and my co-host at that time was Curtis Allen of NFL Huddle. And we did that, man. And also another blog I created was NFL Huddle. I forgot about that. So I was into a lot of sports blogging at that time. Toyed with it. Twitter, it was like a hobby, to be honest, Bob. But it got serious after that year with Danny Clark. And I'm telling you, the first shows were horrible. Horrible, man.
So I shouldn't feel so bad right now, then. Man,
this show is stupendous compared to my first shows with Danny Clark because we had no equipment. I bought a adapter to link to a studio microphone I had, and it popped, it crackled, and it snapped, crackled, and popped. Yeah, it was Rice Krispies. But man, we just kept on plugging away. And next year I bought some more equipment to make it a little bit better. I was contacted, Sharita the Diva Baptiste. She and we co-hosted for several shows. I brought in Kenny. A lot of people may remember Kenny, the Body Snatcher Times. He was our resident pro because he's my cousin. He played in the National Football League as well as the USFL. And people don't remember this, but he was the bookend. He and Reggie White in Memphis were the two defensive ends. And at that time, Memphis Showboats. And he led the league in sacks that year over Reggie White. And he was first team Pro Bowl for, the USFL and everything else. And his career went on from there. But anyway, so he came on board, and guys, things really changed for us when my good buddy, who was going through some health struggles at this time, I invited him to come in and participate on the podcast one evening. And he came in and he made an immediate impact with his analysis and his thoughts about the Saints and his personality. And that was none other than Derek Stevens, we call the Professor. And, he passed last year, and it's almost a year since his passing. I can't believe that. But he came in, he made an impact, and the rest is history. The ratings went up, the following went up. People loved us and loved him and his personality. And I said, they love you so much, you're going to have the next season, you're going to have a show of your own. And that's when I created The Professor Speaks. And then we brought on Coach Rick Gailey the next season, and he contributed from time to time as a guest. But then I needed Coach to have his own show the year after that, and we did From the Coach's Corner. We did the NFL Huddle. We did the Saints Angels, the ladies who wanted to do things like Mother Hen and Nola Chick and all those guys. Matter of fact, Nola Chick is I think she's one of the producers at the NFL channel now. So, yeah. So we've had a lot of great talent to come through here and make an impact. Barry Hurstis and those guys I would always call in to he induced his show, the Who Dat Confessional, and we became friends, and those guys came a part of the network. Who Dat Confessional was on with us for a year before Deuce decided to do his video blogging, and he's doing a great job. So, I mean, and I forgot about John Hendricks and Barrett. They had their show, the Big Easy Blitz. So, I mean, we've had some great times. The network has really done very well. Saints News Radio has been the flagship for a number of years. And I'm tired, and I said, Bob, it's time for you to come on take over. And now we have Bayou Blitz.
Well, my goodness. I mean, just the names you ran down, and Barry Hurstis and John Hendricks have been so influential to my very young career at doing this so far. Barry's the one that actually got me in to writing in the first place, and then John gave me a shot with the Canal Street Chronicles, where I am today. And before I forget, folks, you can follow us all at Saints News Network or Canal Street Chronicles, and please do so. We cover all kinds of as many topics on the Saints as we can. There's a number of very very talented writers on for both networks. So please, if you're a New Orleans Saints fan or even a fan of the NFL, please give us both a follow. But yeah, I mean, you've run down some names. The professor I unfortunately didn't get to know very well, but I really liked him a lot in the brief experiences I had with him. And Coach Rick, I know you're listening, so I hope you get well soon. Plan to have you on this new show as often as possible. So you got to get well to make us look good. But one more question for you, Kyle. You ran down a list of great memories and some not so great memories if you followed the Saints on the football field. But one thing that I always want to ask somebody that's been in this business a while, obviously none of us, none of the names that you mentioned, none of us are about intentionally disrespecting someone. But something that I always want to know from someone with some experience is give the fans one player that you've had some personal contact with over the years, be it an interview or a number of personal experiences with. Give us one or two players that you think to yourself, wow, I wish the public knew how great a guy this was, even off of the football field. Somebody that really stuck with you over the years.
Malcolm Jenkins, guys. Malcolm, I was able to do, we were able to do as Saints News Radio, the crew did an interview with him. Then I did a one-on-one with him as well. But Malcolm was always supportive of what we did and were trying to do with the Saints News Network. Let's see, Tracy Porter was always supportive of us as well. I had a great interview with him. Deuce McAllister, I had a great one-on-one interview with him as well. And really, I think at that time when Deuce interviewed with us, he was getting the broadcasting bug, and he wanted to kind of put himself out there and see if he could be able to do this. And, look what he's doing now, after a year with Jim, and hopefully he stays on with WWL. Those are some names right there off the bat that I can think of that really were an influence on us and friends of the show. Junior Gillette, believe it or not, guys, crazy as he turned out to be, but Junior, man, he was right there with one of our major kickoff shows. And a lot of these guys, man, I don't want to say anything negative about the organization, but I just wish they would have been more supportive to shows like this show and other podcasts that are out there. And I think their communications department at one time were not as supportive because they didn't understand that from a grassroots situation, we still were expanding the brand of the New Orleans Saints in the National Football League, right? And I mean, think about it. We get thousands of downloads per week, thousands of listens per week. And who are we promoting but the team, right? We're not promoting ourselves. And I get no money from this. This is my love, my passion, what I enjoy doing as far as how I love the New Orleans Saints ever since I was in diapers. Okay, so right now, I think you see more of an evolution, what's going on, more of a willingness to be able to work with talented individuals like yourself, Hendrix, and the others guys like Brian Bienemy. He was on a part of our network as well. A guy to look out for is Brendan Boylan. You know, after he graduates from Gardner Webb, man, look, that's a talented young man. Kevin Buckles is another one who's about to graduate from college. He was a part of our network for several years as well. So, I mean, God has blessed us to be able to have these young men who are young talent that will go elsewhere and do great things, right? And some of these Saints players need to be, it shouldn't be a shield there. There shouldn't be a barrier there where we can't access them. Only the national guys should be able to access them. I don't think that's really good for the grassroots and for people who listen to you, Barry, and read your articles day in and day out. You know, so if we're going to, I would like to see more of an openness with the organization when it comes to people like you guys. Who need to be out there reporting and giving great analysis, sometimes heck a lot better analysis than we're getting from the national guys, right? So those are some of the things that I see, and those are some of the players that had made an impact in our network.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I've only been doing this now, going on 2 years. But yeah, I was told about it when I first got involved, and I see it firsthand myself. It's difficult for, and I'll just call us for what we are. It's difficult for the little guy to overcome the alphabet networks of the ESPNs, the CBSs, et cetera, and really all of us are just we're fans.
That's right. We're fans.
And we're guys and girls that get on the air and talk about football, talk about something that we're very passionate about, which, in my opinion, makes some of our work in a way a little bit better. Not to disrespect the big markets, I don't want to do that, but from a fan's perspective, it makes, I think, some of our work a little bit better because, like you said, we don't get paid to do this. We're just people that care about our football team, and
right.
we legitimately love what we do, and because we love what we do, we put that extra effort into it. And I promise you're going to get that as much effort as I can give to the business. I know that you put as much effort as you can into the business, and Barry and John and and the other writers and everybody that you named, and our friends. I'd be remiss in not mentioning our friends Sean Williams and Alan Ulrich, and John Pinto,
good guys.
The Under the Dome podcast on
good
Tuesday
guys.
nights.
Good guys, man. Look, I do nothing but want to support them, and that's why I started SaintsPodcast.com, is because I didn't want to just showcase only what's happening on Saints News Network, because Deuce needs extra viewers. Sean and those guys need extra viewers. There are people out there that need to be heard. We had what's this guy, BJ from the Bruin something. He needs to be heard. And why can't we work together? I forgot my boy Big T and Nader. Loved them. We all started together, and I used to reach out to your boy Pete and Kevin Held, and I think that's his name, and those other guys, and hey, let's do some collaborations. Oh no, we didn't want to do anything with you. I'm thinking, why, man? I mean, we're fans, like you said, and if you're a fan, I don't have any animosity toward Deuce, or I don't have any animosity toward John, or whomever is on the competing, so-called competing, because I'm doing air quotes, guys, because I'm not really trying to compete with you guys. I'm trying to be able to promote your brand. Anytime John said, Kyle, can I? All right, sure, definitely. You got my support. So that's what we need: more access, more accessibility to the teams, to each other. It shouldn't be, I'm thinking I'm getting a scoop. Who's really getting a scoop out there unless you're right there in the locker room with those guys? You're not. Let's be honest, man. I know Nader has done a great job with Big T, and Nader has firsthand access to a lot of those players because he also does promotions and things to that nature. But look, guys, and I'm sorry to go on this rant, Bob, but if we're fans and we're fans of the black and gold, we need to support one another. Period. That's it. And I even I've heard some horror stories about people who have fan pages on Facebook who are banning this guy because we really don't like him, or we don't like exactly what he said about the Saints because it is true, but we don't want to see the truth. It's crazy. Why? I mean, everybody is not going to agree with everything that's being said, but it doesn't mean you go off on this high and mighty tangent and thinking that you can, just because you have 100,000 followers, you're going to ban people. So what? It doesn't matter. What content are you bringing out there for the people to be able to hear, respond to? That's what we're trying to do at Saints News Network, is bring you new talent, new content, and new views on our team as a fan.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this fun. Good football debates, different viewpoints, and certainly we want a little bit of disagreement. For everybody to sit there and say, "Yeah, I agree with this," and "Yeah, I agree with that." Well, that gets a little bit more boring and monotonous. There's all kinds of different viewpoints for how our team or the league that our team is in, how they're running things. But it's fun to get those different viewpoints. And I know we're going to wrap up in a minute, but as our show goes on, we are going to have a number of the names that we've been talking about. We're going to have them on as guests. Everybody is going to get certainly a chance to promote themselves, promote their network, and we want to get their viewpoints on the Saints and their own analysis from wherever it comes from. We plan on setting up a text line where you'll be able to, the fans, the viewers of the show will be able to text different questions in to those of us on the show ahead of time, or if we know, we will know, different guests, and we'll promote that. As we go along, you can text your questions that you want us to ask. The guest is going to be on that particular week. We want all of you to be involved with our show, because that's one of my own visions for this, is to make it. So many people were instrumental in just me getting to this point, and I want to give a voice to every single person out there. Kyle, you mentioned a little bit of the social media factor, and some of these groups, there are people that are frankly afraid to voice their opinion or ask a question because they are legitimately trying to learn something or to find out what's going on. And we want to be the kind of show and the kind of network that you folks can come to, and feel free to ask us anything or ask our guest anything, because we want you to feel like you were involved in the product that we put out there. And that's my vision for what we want to do here moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say this, man. I'm an old dog now. I'm 51, about to be 52. I want young, talented guys like we have the young man Brent. He's now a part of our network. You have you, Bob. We have Barry. At one time, guys, we had over 17 fans who were part of the Saints News Network that were on the air broadcasting on a weekly basis. Okay? Wow. We had 5 shows throughout the week. I was exhausted. I was producing several of those at a time. But I'm saying this to say this. If you guys have the ability to go ahead and if it's in your mind to create something, do it. Don't sit back and wait for someone else to give you the permission to go do it, man. No one gave me permission to say, hey, Kyle, go, you can't do this, or you need to have this to do that. No. Oh, okay. I wanted to do it, and I did it. So, and I'm encouraging the fans, if you want to write, come to Saints News Radio, Saints News Network. Barry is going to give you the platform to write. Hey, we want writers to come. We encourage you to have your voice and to be able to hone your craft. It's necessary that we can keep cultivating more and more and more and more and more and more instead of inhibiting. I'm not an inhibitor, man. I'm always about trying to be creative and giving people the opportunity. And that's why you're here.
And I thank you so much for that. And, you guys that are listening to us right now, if I could speak for Kyle, I know both of us thank you from the bottom of our hearts, for bringing us into your home, hopefully every Wednesday night from here on out. And like I said, this is, like we said at the beginning, this is our first show. We were both really excited to do this. But we're really excited about moving forward. And again, we have Draft Eve next Wednesday night. So definitely tune in to us at 8 o'clock Eastern time and 7 Central time. And we'll delve a little bit deeper into the draft and what we could potentially see, what kind of moves we can potentially see from the New Orleans Saints. If you guys have any ideas or input on how you think our show went, you can reach both of us on Twitter. You can reach Kyle on Facebook. I'm having some issues with mine at the moment, but we hope that we're part of your Wednesday night routine.
Yeah, definitely. Don't forget, you can always go to saintsnewsnetwork.com. You can put in some emails or requests to myself and Barry. You can always go to saintsnews.net You can reach me through that, or you can just reach us online at Saints News through Twitter, at Saints News through Facebook, at Saints News through Instagram. You can contact me, K Mosley, at saintsnews.net. I answer, I follow, I give you my opinions. No, I don't really give my opinions. But anyway, I'm there to be able to answer any questions I can and to be able to help our fans.
Well, Mr. Mosley, we have our first show under our belt.
Great job, Bob. Great job, man. Thank you for allowing me to talk my head off. But thank you so much. And guys, you got to be on the air and listen to Bob Rose every week. He's going to drop some knowledge on you. Next week, we're going to have a great draft show, right, Bob? With Barry Hursters. Who else is going to possibly be on?
Both Barry and I have some feelers out. No, we don't have any 100% commitments yet, but I can guarantee you we're going to have at least one outstanding guest that we will as we get a little bit closer and we get a concrete commitment. We'll start name dropping then. But I promise you will not be disappointed in our draft extravaganza, in our pre-draft extravaganza next Wednesday night.
All right.
And have a few guests lined up as our show goes moving forward too. So really excited to be a part of all this.
All right. And you can catch everything at saintspodcast.com if you want to listen to this replay. And you can also go to at saintsnewsnetwork.com as well as at saintsnews.net to listen to the replays as well. And don't forget, guys, support Bob, support Barry. Give him your feedback on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. We need to hear from you. We love y'all. Keep supporting us and our friends from the other networks. Whatever you're doing, we are here for you, and we love you, man. We love y'all. Keep it up. Keep up the great work. Okay, Bob?
All right, that sounds great, and I thank you all again for tuning in, and can't wait to be in your homes again next Wednesday. Like Kyle said, y'all have any input or any questions or anything even that you'd like us to cover, drop us a line at any time. I'd love to hear feedback, and like I said, we want to make this a very fan-incorporated show as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Mr. Mosley, thank you for being my first official guest.
Anytime,
and I hope to have you on many times in the near future as well. I know you said you're tired, but ladies and gentlemen, I annoy Kyle. I think he's too nice to say it, but I annoy Kyle with my texting him my questions and my concerns and everything like that. So don't let him fool you. He likes to stay in the background. But I like to keep the man involved. I love his opinion and input and experience.
Hey, that's just because you know my wife stopped giving me my Geritol and my my Viagra. But anyway, guys, hey, those are just jokes. And hey, thank you, Bob, and thank you, fans. And we'll be back on next week. Y'all take care.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Bye.